Back for another day of Make It Stick. We're jumping into Anki. We got 2 flashcards due. In one sentence, what is the main point of chapter 1? Learning is misunderstood. Okay. The most effective learning techniques are often counterintuitive. Yeah, I think that's decent. People often misunderstand learning. Okay. Durable learning requires effort, struggle, and retrieval, not passive review. Yeah, I didn't get that. People misunderstand learning. What did I say? I said the most effective learning techniques are often counterintuitive. Durable learning requires effort, struggle, and retrieval, not passive review. Okay. We're just going to take off this people misunderstand learning. No, we'll keep it. Whatever, I'll say it again. What are the 5 sections of chapter 5 avoid illusions of knowing? Active learning from the get-go, successful intelligence, dynamic testing, structure building. No, we're get beyond learning styles. This is avoid illusions of knowing. Avoid illusions of knowing. The 2 systems of knowing. Illusions and memory distortions. Mental models. Unskilled and unaware of it. Tools and habits for calibrating your judgment. Cool. All right. Good. So what did we read about yesterday? Make a mistake. Well, we finished the section on active learning from the get-go. The last bit of that section was all about learning styles, okay? And a group of cognitive psychologists, they get together to review the research on learning styles, okay? What they were looking for is science, like rigorous science that definitively shows that the critical claim that the traditional view of learning styles makes is supported by the evidence. The critical claim that the traditional view of learning styles poses is that people have these different learning styles: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, verbal, and to receive information and instruction in the mode that is your style is an advantage that will lead to more learning for you than if you received that information in any other form. Okay? All right, well, what they found in the research was that there was very few studies that even were set up to have clear, definitive evidence to support or refute the critical claim. And of the few studies that were solidly structured, very few of them validated the critical claim, and actually many of them contradicted the critical claim. What they did find to be evident in their review was that learning style did matter, or mode of instruction did matter depending on what subject you were teaching. So visual instruction for geography and geometry were more beneficial than, say, auditory or verbal. And the same for poetry. Poetry was better taught with better learning outcomes for all students when it was verbal mode of instruction primarily, rather than, say, visual or auditory, right? Or kinesthetic. So the mode of instruction seemed to matter not for the individuals and their learning style or preference, but rather for what was being taught. Okay, so that was the end of active learning from the get-go. Really, that section can be summed up by 4 learning differences that matter, as well as learning styles. Okay, then we started the next section, successful intelligence. So we get into this next learning difference that matters, this learning difference that is intelligence. And the authors pose, well, what is intelligence? Across cultures, we all have this concept of intelligence, but what really is it? Well, modern psychologists claim that there are at least two aspects of intelligence: fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence is your ability to reason, think abstractly, hold things in mind while trying to solve a problem, whereas crystallized intelligence is more just the knowledge you've acquired in your life, okay? So the traditional view of IQ, or the traditional view of intelligence, was that it was fixed from birth, and IQ was used to measure, as an attempt to measure intelligence. And IQ traditionally was essentially your mental age divided by your physical age times 100. So the example was an 8-year-old that could solve problems if the typical 10-year-old would be mental age 10 divided by 8 physical age, and that would be 1.25 times 100, 125 IQ. Cool? That was the traditional view of IQ. Okay. This claim that intelligence was fixed from birth has been challenged, and we just got into Howard Gardner's claim or hypothesis that there is as many as 8 different forms of intelligence, and we'll just see if I can list them. I don't need to memorize them, but we'll see if I can list them. So, mathematical, spatial, linguistic, naturalistic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, kinesthetic possibly, and then I'm missing one again. I'm forgetting it, but actually, what were the 4 learning differences that mattered from active learning from the get-go? Let's see if we can recall that. How we see ourselves and our beliefs around abilities and our own abilities and ourselves. Basically taking initiative for your own education and learning, taking responsibility for that. Rule building or rule learning / structure learning. And then the last one would be what was learning style, but no. I don't know. Let's see what we're missing. Language fluency, reading abilities, that's right. And then the 8th intelligence, Howard Gardner's intelligence, was logical, mathematical. That's not mathematical. What, did I get them all? Musical. Of course, musical. All right, so now let's make sure I got everything. Cool. All right, good. Cool. All right. Looks like we got everything, so I'm going to continue reading now. I'll be back to recall in a little bit. Guys, just completed this section, successful intelligence. All right. So Howard Gardner's 8 intelligence, not supported by empirical evidence, just like the learning styles theories. However, Robert Sternberg presents a different model where there's 3 intelligences, and this is actually supported by empirical research. The 3 intelligences being academic, analytical, creative, and practical. Analytical is mostly related with like formal academia, more like academics, more like what you see on a normal test. This is probably what IQ tests largely is analytical. At least for out of the 3, the most. Creative intelligence is essentially taking existing knowledge and applying them in unique ways. And then the third is practical, which is more like street smarts or like hands-on, like day-to-day, everyday life knowledge. Okay, so Sternberg's Kenya study studied basically Kenyan youth, in which in Kenya they have these herbal medicines and practical things like recognizing herbs and being able to create medicines, and it being promoted to but very beneficial for their survival rate and success in life is to be able to create their own medicines with these indigenous herbs. And what they found was the children or the youth that were most knowledgeable of the indigenous knowledge and the herbal medicine knowledge, these students actually performed the worst on the traditional IQ test or academic style test, so much that they would appear to be stupid, even though they were the most competent in the practical, like survival and indigenous knowledge. And so Sternberg takes away two things from this, essentially. First of all, what were the takeaways? I think it was something along the lines of like academic testing, traditional intelligence testing is not able to capture environmental influence, because what he found was that it was possible, I don't know if he found this exactly or if this was an inference, but that the environments in which the different children grew up in, families that promoted more practical knowledge, the herbal indigenous knowledge, were more knowledgeable of those things and less knowledgeable of the academic knowledge, and the families that promoted more academic knowledge as valued had a higher scores of academic knowledge, yet less in practical. It was kind of the environment that shaped the children's intelligences, right? And so beyond this, he said that these indigenous knowledge students, youth, it's not to say that they couldn't actually become as good academically as the peers that did better on academics and worse on the practical knowledge. And maybe they could even be better if the right environment presented itself. So he kind of says we're in a states of development. We're always developing more expertise in the three different intelligences and different subsections and fields within those. And so traditional IQ and intelligence testing is not great because it doesn't take into account the environments, but neither does it. Also, it's like a static snapshot. So it's like, what does the student know right now? How does the student think right now? And it does very little to know justice for the potential of the student to learn more, to be able to learn how to think differently and become a better problem solver, become better with language, become better with patterns and all this. So doesn't take into account, traditional intelligence testing doesn't take into account environmental influence, as well as potential of the person, the individual, to further develop in these fields being tested. So Sternberg, he cites two more kind of studies or examples to support his three models. One of them was these Brazilian orphans who were they had to figure out how to do like street business essentially to survive. And what they found was that the math they had to do for their street businesses, when they were presented in like a formal test, they were not able to do the math that they literally do every day for their business. Again, practical knowledge versus analytical knowledge. Then the other example was these handicappers who were very good at handicapping for horse races, who had these very complex mental models of, the horse's lifetime winnings, the horse's lifetime speed, the jockey, the last time the horse won, all these different variables, multivariable reasoning, as many as 7 different variables they used to calculate and handicap that were very successful at betting in horse races. appeared to have average IQ, and after the study, they found the conclusion that there was no correlation between IQ and success in horse race handicapping. Even though this is multivariate complex thinking, apparently there's no correlation between IQ and that multivariate complex thinking. So again, what does IQ actually show? Very limited scope, something very limited, that is. So yeah, Robert Sternberg's 3 successful intelligences: academic, creative, practical. And it really depends on the upbringing, what the environment shapes the individual to need to be successful. And it doesn't say intelligence is static. It's something that can be further developed if the opportunity and the environment presents itself in which someone needs to develop a new intelligence or more intelligence in one area. All right. So Sternberg. Yep. Cool. All right. So that's the section on successful intelligence completed. Tomorrow I will sum it up, what this section was about. And then we'll be into the next section, which is dynamic testing. So that's pretty cool. By the end of tomorrow, we should be, let's see, 1, 2, 3. We should be about 100 pages from finishing the book tomorrow. So about 60% of the way. That's it for today. I will talk to you guys later. See you.